The goals for this session are to create a simple script with JMeter together and to get to know the different JMeter elements. We are not going to deep dive into the configuration of each element. That will be done separately in the rest of the sessions. The first element you can see is the test plan, which is the root of the entire JMeter script. We will start by adding a thread group to our test plan. Let's step back and ask, what is a thread group for? The simple answer is that its job is creating threads, and those threads are users. So thread groups determine the number of virtual users, the virtual visitors to a site or to an application that JMeter will simulate when executing the test plan. So if we go into the thread group, we will use for this test a number of threads of 10 virtual users. The ramp up will be in 60 seconds, and we will do it with only one iteration. The second element we will add is a sampler. So the samplers in JMeter allows JMeter to send different types of requests to a server. So actually the sampler is the thing that executes traffic or do the work. If we go into the thread group, we can add a sampler. And as you can see, there are different types of samplers. So the HTTP request is the most common use, but you have different types of requests. For instance, an FTP request or a WebSocket sampler or an SSH command, so it will depend on the functionality that you want to execute. Let's add an HTTP request. In the HTTP request, we need to specify to which server we are going to hit. So for this demo, we will hit the website demoblaze.com, and we can specify a particular protocol or a particular port. Also, we can select the method, the path of the request, and if we need to include any parameters or body data to our request. The next element we will add is the timer. First, let's make sure that when we think of the timer, we have the correct definition. The timers are not something that calculates time. For example, how long does something take? Actually, the way we use timers in JMeter is to introduce an intentional delay or wait before an execution takes place. The reason we do that is we want to have a realism in our test. When a user goes to our website, demoblaze.com, who will click on something, read something, then he waits and he needs to complete a form, for example, and after completing the form, he will click again the submit button. So we can add a timer, and as you can see, we have different types of timers. For this example, we are going to use a constant timer, and the thread delay will be of 300 milliseconds. One important point to remember is that the timers are executed before the sampler's execution. So the wait time defined in the timer will be executed before this HTTP request. After the sampler, we will add an assertion to our script. An assertion, if you look at the word, to assert means you want to be sure of something. And the reason why we use assertions is to make sure that the test is where we want to be, or that the server is behaving in the way we expect it to behave. So if we go back to our script, I would add an assertion to my HTTP request. And we have different types of assertion. For this demo, we would add a response assertion. As any other JMeter element, you can specify the name for that element in your test plan. So for this example, the response assertion will be called response assertion of the homepage of our website. So you have different options in the configuration of the assertion. And the first thing to look at is which field to test. This means which field do you want to assert to a specific test or to a specific regular expression. After adding the assertion, we will add a preprocessor and a postprocessor. The preprocessors are the JMeter elements that are used to execute actions before the sampler requests are executed in the test scenario. And the postprocessor executes some action after making a sampler request. The preprocessor can be used for different performance testing needs like fetching or updating data from a database, setting a timeout between samplers execution, or before test data generation. The postprocessors are usually used for extracting certain values from the response of a sampler request. For instance, we can extract the value of the session variables from an HTTP request and pass the session variables value to the subsequent request. On our example, we will go to the HTTP request and we will add a preprocessor, and we will be using the JSR223 preprocessor, and also we will add a postprocessor. the JSR223 postprocessor. And what is the JSR223? So this is used to perform some operation using the JSR223 scripting, where you can select any type of language from this list and write the code to execute an action. Whereas, is it going to be before the sampler in the preprocessor or after the sampler in the postprocessor? So one example could just be to log some information into our log. So this is before, and let's add the same one to the postprocessor, specifying that this is going to be after. So we will see these two logs in the JMeter logs when running this test. We will finalize the script by adding a listener and running the test. So the listeners are the JMeter component that displays the test results. The variety of the JMeter listeners enables to monitor the request sent from JMeter, as well as to analyze the responses received from the system under test. If we go into the thread group and add a listener, we can see different types of listener. Now, a very important point is that all the listeners will collect the same data. The difference will be at the presentation level. So we will add the listener view results tree, and we will be ready to run our test. Before running our test, I will enable the log viewer, so I will clean everything and start running the test. When running this test, we can see in the view results tree the list of samplers that were executed. We only created one HTTP request, but in the thread group, we defined to have 10 virtual users. So we will have 10 requests to the HTTP request demoblaze.com. In the request tab, we can see the request body and the request header, and in the response data tab, we'll be able to see the response body and the response header. Also, we can see the log, the JMeter log, and we have the log that we created in the preprocessor and in the postprocessor.